Hello and welcome to Raising Financially Fit Families with Joline Godfrey podcast. I'm your podcast producer, RJ Malik. Joline, hello, and how are you today?
I am terrific today and happy to be here again, RJ.
So you have a guest, so why don't you introduce your guest and your topic for today's podcast?
Great. So I am with Sarah Hopper of Sound Philanthropy. And Sarah, I'm really excited because I realize I think you and I have known each other since the very beginning of Sound Philanthropy. And I wonder if you just talk about that for a moment, explain what Sound Philanthropy is, and then we'll launch from there.
Wonderful, Joline. I'm so happy to be here with you again and just love conversations, whether it's in a podcast or together over dinner or in the context of client work. But you're right. Actually, as I'm thinking about it, we met at an event with one of my first clients who you were working with, Threshold Group, which is
Love that family.
Yeah, just fantastic. And they were doing such wonderful work with Community Square. And that was the beginning of my launch of Sound Philanthropy and into this world of philanthropic advising. And at the time, I was just coming off of 10 years at Sound Foundation, the community foundation where I live and work in Seattle. And was launching, sort of hanging my shingle and going out as a philanthropic advisor to work with clients who were trying to do philanthropy differently and in the context of their families. And we connected and I've known you ever since in several different contexts.
It's crazy. And so what has Sound Philanthropy evolved into that makes you happiest? Because I know you had an original vision. You were, as I recall, it was providing philanthropic services to families. And it was pretty generic and basic in those days. But I think you have evolved that. Describe what has happened over the last number of years.
You are right. As with everything in life, nothing is constant. And my work has evolved, and I'm so happy and grateful for it. It has not shifted dramatically from my original purpose. I'm still working with families and guiding and walking alongside them as they are on their philanthropic journey and their learning journey. In this space, I think what's changed the most is that, well, I've gone from being an independent advisor in philanthropy, working independently on my own, to actually having staff. So growing my company and bringing on some amazing, intelligent experts in this field to help serve and work with the families that we work with and the philanthropists that we work with. And that's a shift. It's a shift from sort of what does it look like to have Sarah Hopper at the back versus to have a whole team as you're trying to do your work in the world. I think the other piece that's really evolved, and this has been since my growth and really in the last 5 years, has been the values alignment and really thinking about how has philanthropy shifted? How is it trying? I wouldn't even say how is it shifted. I would say how is it trying to shift in these times? And certainly in the last 5 years, as these times have been all over the place.
You know, I'm old enough to remember the days when philanthropy meant charity and you gave charity. And in part that stemmed, I suppose, from tithing, a religious orientation towards giving. But for a long time, it was doing good for the poor. And I think we've gone so far beyond that. Sometimes I wonder if we've gone too far beyond it. But I don't think you're focused on that so much anymore, right? Or maybe you are.
That is such an excellent point. That you're right. I mean, as usual, Joline, you are right on target with that. And I think the word philanthropy scares people. And being a philanthropist,
Yeah,
has a certain weight to it. I think that, or I know because I hear it from the people that I work with, that feels like a responsibility that they're not necessarily comfortable with. But you're right, because there is truly a difference between charity and philanthropy. And if you think about even the word philanthropy, and I think most of us are familiar with the Greek roots, the love of humanity. And when you truly consider and embody what that is, it's not about giving money, which is how you might define charity. And it really is about how do you bring humanity into the experience of philanthropy rather than the transaction of charity. The real experience of philanthropy is around centering humanity. And I think that's where my company's, my own, and my clients' values alignment have really become such an important part of the current and future trajectory of my work and of Sound Philanthropy, because you have to really reflect on what humanity means and how that shows up in philanthropy, not only in the ways that we define financial support, but also in the ways that we look internally and sort of look internally at ourselves and how we're showing up. And as part of that, at the power dynamic that it inherits.
I am so thrilled that we've gone down this path, because I can imagine, particularly over the coming year or couple of years, more and more families are going to look at their philanthropic dollars and say, oh, we can now use AI to determine where we're going to put our philanthropic funds. But that literally takes all the humanity right out of the process. And oh my God, that is such a chilling idea for me on so many levels. I think you lose so much when you lose that connection. Actually, I'm going to veer off to tell kind of a weird story connected to this. And I used this in an earlier podcast. It is, as I shared in another podcast, I said in the middle of the night, this is a little embarrassing, but I caught an episode of the Ozzie and Harriet show. Now, this is wacko, but bear with me for a moment. So in this particular episode, little Ricky, who really is little in this episode, comes bounding down the stairs and he yells at his mother, Mom, can you teach me how to do the Charleston? And she, looks bewildered, but agrees to do that. In that moment, I had this realization that today's kid wouldn't bother to come bounding down the stairs to find their mom to teach them the Charleston, because they could just go on YouTube. Disruption between mom and kid or dad and kid or whoever. And I think, that is a loss in the family. It's very clear to me that missing those, impromptu, silly little connections that families find with one another is a true loss. And I think that carries over into exactly what you're talking about. If we take the humanity out of philanthropic activity, I'm not sure what it is any longer. But it's something different, and it doesn't have heart or soul or impact. And of course, we talk about impact all the time. But I wonder how much you find your clients are talking or thinking about this.
Such a good question. I love the story. I love that. That story makes me think also of human capital, and I learned a lot about human capital from you, and that is truly what you described. That story of learning the Charleston from a parent is such a great example of that. And but it's interesting what your statement about humanity and how it relates to philanthropy. And what's interesting is that there is a movement. There is a movement in philanthropy, and I'm probably a bit naive because it's a movement that all of my clients are participating in. So I probably have this misconception that it's larger than it actually is, but it's a movement that I really believe in, that is actually trying to move philanthropy more towards a human approach, an approach that centers humanity. And it centers around a couple of different ideologies. One is trust-based philanthropy. So there's a whole learning module. I mean, trust-based philanthropy project is an actual thing based out of California. And it's a pretty simple and straightforward approach to philanthropy where you're trying to eliminate barriers and burden on your partners, on the organizations that you're partnering with as a grant maker by providing multi-year unrestricted grants, eliminating paperwork and processes like applications and reporting, or at least aligning those to something that the organization's already doing. And generally sort of just leaning into what does it mean to show up in trust and relationship with the scientific organization. So that's one sort of movement of ideology that's part of this movement. And another was a book that was written, and there's a second edition out now by a man who has worked in the philanthropic space for a long time, named Edgar Villanueva. And his book is called Decolonizing Wealth. And it's about how do you use money as medicine in the context of philanthropic giving. And in it, and how it's contributing to sort of this overall movement that is kind of this trust-based philanthropy and this concept of money as medicine is that when you are truly addressing the power dynamic that's inherent in the givers of money and the doers of the work, and showing up in relationship to your grantees, what does that actually look like? And how do you build relationships across wealth, across lived experiences, and truly sort of embody what it means to be in relationship with those that we're giving.
Right. This is such an important and timely conversation, it seems to me, because I can imagine somebody listening would say, oh yeah, trust is nice, but that's why fraud happens. And in this age of distrust, you and I are talking about going against what everybody out there, is thinking in terms of, oh, you are naive. But I think what you're saying is, you have to build a relationship that's real enough and deep enough and authentic enough that you can trust. It's not that you're going to trust every, Jeff and Johnny out there. It's that you're going to build a relationship. But I think, back to Ricky and the Charleston, there are fewer and fewer ways we have of being connected to one another. I mean, I think about our relationship, which has truly stood the test of time, at least from my perspective, even though we haven't spent a lot of physical proximate time together. I would turn over pretty much anything to you in trust because we have a long-term relationship. That is part of my social capital. It's not a transaction. It is, to your point, the relationship. That is so valuable. It's so much more valuable. I know I'm going to sound like an idiot, but it feels more valuable to me than dollars and cents. Do you think parents are equipped, or do you think they're trying even to get that across to their kids these days?
I think parents are. I mean, I think we are, I can speak as a parent of 3 kids. We are, and it's so much harder because the world is so much more complex. And that is not news to anybody, the complexity of the world that we live in. But it's even it's more complex for me in some ways than it is for my 18-year-old son, because he's grown up in that level of complexity. And even though it's changed and, and gotten even, more so in the course of, in the span of his lifetime, there are things I simply don't understand because I'm of a different generation. But how, I mean, it's truly the billion-dollar question. How do you raise children to understand the importance of building relationships that are based in trust in order to have connection, in order to center humanity, going back to kind of an earlier theme. And in order to, I mean, in some ways, honestly, Joline, and I guess it saddens me a little to say this, but to even build that muscle, to build the muscle of trusting relationships, to your point about the kid learning the Charleston, he could have easily asked AI, asked ChatGPT or gone on YouTube and found 553 videos on how to do the Charleston. And yet, how do you build the muscle of connection, whether it's between a parent and a child, between a child and a mentor or a friend or, fill in the blanks, some other human being, rather than a screen, rather than a phone, rather than a voice activated something or other. And as it relates to philanthropy, if you don't have, if you're not building that muscle of trusting relationship, then how can you enter into the world, whether you're simply tithing, giving 10% or less or smaller amounts, or whether you're on the level of some of the larger philanthropies, how do you enter the world and show up with humility, understanding that we don't have all the answers, and that their trusting relationships are going to be the key to having impact, to sort of the concept that you glad in hold.
So interesting. I'm not a Luddite. I mean, I've been reading science fiction since I was just very, very young. It does feel now as though we are back at the beginning of the Stone Age, trying to reinvent the inclination to relationship building in a way that is counterintuitive. I mean, I think about progress making our relationships more sophisticated and better and deeper. And indeed, no, we're now trying to get kids to understand even the basics of relationships, which makes no sense at all. But it also relates to something else I want to make sure we talk about, because you and I are both engaged in trying to shift a culture of siloed philanthropic efforts around certainly the country and the world into more collaborative efforts. And as I think about the humanitarian piece of that, I think it's also connected. If you aren't prone to collaboration because you trust somebody, you're going to work in your silo because you know it works. What are you seeing there? Is this a hopeless task at this point? Because I want this very much to happen. But I also don't want to be an idiot. So where do you think we are in this whole process of silos to collaboration in philanthropy?
It's interesting. And I think that I'm going to sort of answer that question in two parts. And, the first being, we absolutely can't do this in silos anymore. It's too important. It's too urgent. It's too precious to be working independently, to think we have all the answers. You probably saw this morning that the Gates Foundation announced that they're spending out in 20 years, $150 billion. That is a massive undertaking. And that is a perfect example of they should be working today, day one of this announcement, to just find those partners, both funding partners and collaborators, as well as lean into the knowledge and expertise of those working on the ground, and, the community birthed and bred and nurtured ideas of what solutions are really going to have impact, in, on the issues and the challenges that communities face. So yes, Gates Foundation needs to cut that red tape and move forward in an incredibly collaborative way in order to accomplish this task.
What a model that would set.
Absolutely. Truly. And they have been a model in so many ways in philanthropy, and also, my opinion, but I'll share it since this is a conversation with you in a safe space, a model in many ways and a hindrance in others. If, they are truly, the Gates Foundation is always, everybody knows about them. If you don't,
right.
My work is so niche, and whenever I tell people what I do, the answer is either that they have, that they have a fund for themselves that my clients could contribute to, or, oh, so you work with the Gates Foundation. No, not directly. So, but I think that the idea of breaking down some of those silos and collaborating it's simply, we have to do that. And I do see it more now than I did 25 years ago when I sort of started in this philanthropic space. And, one of the things that my client base, that we have created in my client base, among my clients is getting to know each other and co-funding and learning and doing personal work around, whether it's around justice issues or racial justice issues or social justice issues, and learning together. And so we have our microcosm sort of trying to break down some of those silos. But the second part to your question, and my part two answer, is that I think that we will, at least for the time being, that there's a strong likelihood that we will see greater collaboration and breaking down of silos within the constraints of political belief. So left-leaning foundations and philanthropies are coming together and are linking arms and rallying around what those foundations believe to be the right approach to these times. And more conservative philanthropy have been doing that for a lot longer than left-leaning philanthropy have. And I think that delta is going to get larger before it comes together. I'm sad to say that, but I just think that's the reality.
I think you are right. And yet I will tell you, I was on a conversation, 4 or 5 days ago, and somebody made a statement which really caught my attention. It was a group of women from a variety of women's organizations, and one of the people said, well, it's not that I am against Trump at all. She said, this isn't political for me. What I am concerned about are the backward movements in terms of women's rights. As soon as she said that, it was like a lightning bolt for me, because she simply transcended politics in that moment and went to an issue that didn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. Rights for women seems pretty universal, or if it's not, then I'm in the wrong planet. But, which often feels the case, just want to say. But, but I thought that reframing is so refreshing, and it opened up a conversation that I think really means that to help people tap into their own humanity again is going to require us to be more creative, to think in ways that transcend these terrible polarizations we have gotten ourselves into in such a terrible way. one is where I watch the minutes go and I think, damn, how did that happen? Uh, but do you know who Lisa Parker is?
I know her very well, actually. Yes.
Good. All right. Well, I'm actually seeing her next week, and I'm excited to talk to her about this conversation. But as you know, Lisa started, I think, the first, or certainly one of the first, foundations for young children, which was a groundbreaker. And it occurs to me that teaching cousins to collaborate is really just such a simple, straightforward way to teach the whole, discipline of collaboration. I'm wondering if you're seeing more of that these days, if other families are trying it. What's happening out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just want to jump back to just say one thing, and it relates a little bit about the comment that that this woman in your group mentioned about sort of and this idea of transcending politics and focusing on important issues and again, I'm broken record in this, but centering humanity in that. And I do have a hope, Jolene, and this in a roundabout way gets at the question about cousins and just peers, really. Um, I hope, and I'm just going to believe that younger generations, that my kids' generation and younger generations, and those who are coming, who are growing and becoming leaders in this world, that they're, and I see glimpses of this, which is why I'm just going to decide to believe it, that will happen, that transcending politics and focusing on important issues and taking them out of just removing them from the political realm will happen, and probably not in our lifetime, but I believe it will happen because for instance, the vast majority of young people in the U.S. believe that abortion rights should be something that every woman should have. And that spans across young people who vote left and vote right. And so I think that there is this weird place that we're in right now where the generations who are in leadership, from the baby boomers to the millennials right now, are a little bit clunky and a little bit twisted in how we view the world. And that's where we are. And that future leaders are, and I'm sorry, future leaders, but they will have some mess to clean up there. But, in terms of cousins, I think, again, similar to that cross-branch, cross-generational impact that we know is so positive, can be so positive, between aunts and nieces and nephews and uncles and nieces and nephews. I think that cousins play a really important role, and I've seen that playing out with one client, that their younger generation, their G5 generation, is now coming into the leadership roles of the foundation. In fact, in January, the first G5 president of the foundation stepped into his role. And when I think of ways that those cousins are working together, not only on the foundation board, but more broadly around awareness building and onboarding of other leadership positions within the family, there's a lot of mentorship, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of disconnection that's happening and burning that happens. So I feel this very incredible opportunity. Okay.
That's very encouraging. And indeed, change is always messy. I mean, it's just messy. So, when younger people say, "Oh, you're left us with," I think every generation has left us with. So get over it. It's just what you get. As we come to the end of this conversation, though, I do want to pick up on one other thing you said that I think I'm going to steal, which is you're going to choose to believe. And one of my advisors is a man who is a collector of many different things, but also he collects magic memorabilia, which means that he knows a fair amount about magic. And he made it possible for me to go to the Magic Castle some years ago, which, I'm quite a fan now. But I think about magic as being one of those great, joyful parts of life. You choose to believe this is magic as you watch some crazy thing unfold and you think, how did that happen? Your brain knows it probably isn't exactly magic. There's a method behind it, but nonetheless, you choose to believe and it's joyful. So I'm actually going to adopt your notion of choosing to believe because I do think you're right. I think there is an impulse for growth. I think we yearn for humanity. Um, whether people can articulate it or not, that's what we all want is this humanity. This requires more conversation, Sarah. I know we're going to have it soon over dinner. Um, but I really would love to have you come back and so we can go down this particular rabbit hole a little more. I think humanity does not get the time and attention it deserves, and we should fix that. So this is good.
I would be happy to, Jolene, anytime that I will talk about humanity with you anytime.
Excellent. Oh, thank you for being here today. RJ, I can see you're here ready to bring us to a close. Darn it.
Yeah. Yes, I'm throwing the flag. You're done. No, I'm joking. Sarah, before you go, can you give us some contact information?
Certainly. It's been wonderful to be here, Jolene. Thank you. And thank you, RJ. Sarah Hopper, and my company is called Sound Philanthropy. You want an email, RJ, or?
Whatever's the easiest way for people to get in touch with you.
Okay. Sarah, Sarah, at soundphilanthropy, all one word, .com.
Excellent. And Jolene, your turn. Contact info.
Well, as usual, it is Joline, and that's with an I, Joline at bounce-10.com. So I look forward to the next one.
Excellent. I am looking forward to it as well. And Sarah and Jolene, thank you. And we're looking forward to your next podcast. And thank you for listening to today's Raising Financially Fit Families with Joline Godfrey podcast. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with friends and family. Until our next podcast, for Joline Godfrey, I'm RJ Malik.